As a country, we have had an interesting few days, and that is putting it lightly. It was probably the most bizarre weekend that I can personally recall that we've had in American politics, and I realize that that is a very heavy statement. From allegations that Trump blew Bubba, to speculation that Bubba was Bill Clinton, to Trump crashing out and blasting the Phantom of the Opera from the White House speakers, things have only gotten more strange in the days since. And I'm recording this on Wednesday, so we are only halfway through the week. But earlier this week, following the blowing Bubba email drop, Trump suddenly decided that he was okay with the files being released. Release them, he said. He said the only reason he didn't want them released before was because the files were a distraction. They were distracting the American people from all of the good things the Republicans were doing in this country. The Democrats don't want you paying attention to how great the Trump administration is, so naturally they cooked up an entire Epstein hoax to just distract everyone.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Well, why was your team encouraging Congresswoman Boebert and Congresswoman Mace to not pursue
Because
this?
we think it's bad to talk about it because it gets away from the subject of how well the Republicans are doing. We have the greatest economy. We have the largest investment ever made in our country's history. We have all of these great things happen. We have very little inflation, whereas he had record-setting, the biggest inflation in history. All of these things are good. And when you talk about the Epstein hoax, what happens is you're not talking about how well we've done.
Mr. President, on that subject.
And that's the whole purpose behind them. They want to waste people's time, and some of the dumber Republicans like that.
Mr. President, on that subject, coming in as
It's mostly Democrats.
So with the sudden about face, people are naturally wondering why. Why is he suddenly fine with the files being released, even though everything that his administration has done has been done in the interest of blocking these files from public release? And I am including House Speaker Mike Johnson when I refer to the Trump administration, because Johnson just does whatever Trump wants him to do. And I may as well include every other Republican lawmaker in Congress right now when I say that, because all Democrats and all but one Republican have now voted to release the Epstein files. Now that Trump wants the files released, every Republican but one is on board. If there was any doubt that our Congress is full of feckless seat fillers who can't or won't think for themselves or on behalf of the will and well-being of their constituents, then this vote just eliminated all of that doubt. Anyway, so the vote to release the files just passed in Congress 427-1, practically unanimously. Mike Johnson seems to have some feelings about it. He held off on swearing Adelita Grijalva into the House for, 2 months? Because he knew that as soon as she was sworn in, they would have enough votes to release the files, which Trump definitely, as of a few days ago, did not want to happen. Johnson was among the 427 Congresspeople to vote for the release of the files, but apparently now he's mad that the Senate also voted for the release of the files. Here he was just a few days ago expressing why he hadn't signed the discharge petition.
Mr. Speaker, you say that you're for full transparency, so why not just urge all your Republicans to vote for this massive Connell bill on the Epstein files next week? Put out all the files. Let the American public judge for themselves what these files are
Thank
all
you
about.
for asking the question. We have been for maximum transparency of the Epstein files from the very beginning. What I was opposed to is the reckless disregard that was used in drafting the discharge petition. And we've been over this many times, but it was not drafted in such a way that it would adequately protect innocent victims. We have a responsibility to do that.
Now he's reported as saying he is, quote, deeply disappointed in this outcome. He was expecting the Senate to amend the bill, but that didn't happen. I was just told that Chuck Schumer rushed it to the floor and put it out there preemptively, Johnson told the reporter. It needed amendments. I just spoke to the president about that. We'll see what happens. Johnson added that both he and Trump have concerns about the bill as it stands, and was asked whether the president could veto it when it lands on his desk. I'm not saying that, I don't know, said a frustrated Johnson, who said he opposed releasing the files on the grounds that it could reveal the identities of many of the victims. So when Trump announced his support for the release of the files, people were obviously speculating as to why he suddenly changed his mind after months of keeping the files away from the public. For one, people speculated that with his announcement that he wanted the DOJ to investigate the Democrats, he would keep the files tied up in litigation, therefore preventing them from being released for the duration of the investigation, which could go on indefinitely. But the more prevalent line of thinking that I've seen surrounding his change of heart and mind is that he had gotten word that the files had been adequately scrubbed of anything that would be damaging to himself, to other Republicans, or to any of the people outside of this government that Trump may or may not have been trying to protect. And of course, I'm not talking about the Epstein survivors. Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, basically confirmed that to be the case when he spoke to Chris Cuomo, saying, "I've been recently told the reason they're going to be releasing the files and the reason for the flip is that they're sabotaging these files," he told News Nation, adding that they are scrubbing the files to take Republican names out.
What I do want to talk about is I've been recently told the reason they're going to be releasing these things and the reason for the flip is that they're sanitizing these files. There's a facility in Winchester, Virginia, where they're scrubbing the files to take Republican names out of it. That's what I was told by a pretty good source.
But this isn't a partisan issue, or it shouldn't be. If Republicans really cared so much about the things, or really just the one thing that they claim to care about above everything else, then they wouldn't care if Republican names, including or especially Donald Trump's, turn up in the files. Remember, this is the issue that was the crux of the QAnon movement. That movement grew from, or at least was closely aligned with, Pizzagate. So much of what we as a country have endured over the past decade stems from this single issue. However, whenever Republican leaders were found to be guilty of crimes associated with this one issue, Republican voters have defended them and their actions, explaining them away using the most concerning logic sometimes, if you even want to call it logic. That said, there is hope that tides are turning, and even Republican MAGA voters can no longer deny what is happening in front of them. Here's Harry Enton on CNN discussing GOP sentiments regarding the release of the Epstein files.
You know, usually Donald Trump has his pulse on the Republican base, but he did not on this issue, because what are we talking about, Kate Baldwin? Well, GOP on the Epstein files. Approve of Trump. We're used to seeing approval of Trump among Republicans being 85, 90%. But when it came to the Epstein files, look at this. Just 44%, south of 50% of Republicans actually approved on Donald Trump when it came to the Epstein files. Compare that to this. What was the percentage of Republicans that wanted all of the Epstein files released? 67%. So what we were dealing with is simple mathematics. The Republican base was against Donald Trump on the Epstein files. They were with the idea of releasing them. The Republican representatives saw that and therefore were not afraid to go against Donald Trump, because this was the rare instance in which the Republican base was not with Donald Trump. They were actually with the idea of being against Donald Trump and releasing the Epstein files.
So whether or not our government ever releases these files in their entirety, we have yet to see. However, keep in mind that these files exist outside of our government. Plenty of people, not just Americans, but people from around the world, have access to these files. So even if we don't get it from our administration, there is always the hope of an offshore leak. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.